In
Commissions
US,
committee.
in US there are currently 5 GBCs, and these 50 states are divided among these 5 members, and they overlook all the states in those zones. So previously, Bharati Prabhu was serving as GBC, and now Anutama Prabhu has taken that role. GBC for Michigan, Columbus, and Ohio, and Chicago, and many other states. He is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada since 1976. He also serves as the International Director of Communications of ISKCON. He is one of the Board of Directors of Bhaktivedanta College in Belgium. He conducts seminars on ISKCON leadership and management communication courses also. He travels widely and is active in multiple social initiatives within and outside of ISKCON. He serves as the Board of Religion for Peace in USA and the Advisory Board of the Religious Freedom Institute. He is also convener of the Vaishnav Christian and Vaishnav Muslim dialogue in the United States and India. So Prabhu is currently going and visiting all the centers that are under his care and want to meet the congregation. And this is Anuttam Prabhu coming first time to, like, I think Lansing and Grand Rapids, although he has been in Michigan many times.
Raise your hand if you were born in Detroit or in Michigan, in lower Michigan. Raise your hand. Keep your hand up. Okay, so again he was wrong. I'm the only native in the whole room. I was born in Detroit. I grew up in Southfield. I went to school in East Lansing. Then I transferred to that other place. We will not mention the other place in Ann Arbor. We're not going to mention that place.
So let us welcome his guest Anuttama Prabhu by loudly saying,
So we don't have a harmonium, which is very nice because it helps create a very beautiful mood. But we can still chant for a few more minutes. I heard a drum. Somebody is playing drum. I heard a drum. No drum. I thought I heard the drum. Okay. That means you were singing so nicely. We thought we heard the drum. How old is this little Vaishnavi here?
6 months.
How many months? 6 months. So this is what, she's born in April? April. April 10th. Very nice. Very nice. Is it possible just to turn off that fan, or do we need it because we're frying things? Still cooking? Okay, no problem. No problem. Some of you know Prabhupada's pranam mantra?
yes.
Okay, good. Okay. If it's inconvenient, you don't need to turn it off. It's just if it's okay. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine. Your turn. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Ashtachari Shatarine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Ashtachari Shatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Your turn.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Your turn.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna,
I'm curious how far are we actually from the campus? This is like, we went by some like agricultural fields that are part of the university, but like the actual campus, how far is that?
10 minutes.
10, like 8 miles or something?
No. Within 3-4 miles.
3-4 miles.
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
He's a professor, which means if the police pull him over, they say, oh, he's a professor, let him go. So you can go faster. What are you professor? What field?
Huh?
What field?
Biomedical imaging, data science, machine learning, AI.
Which department are you? That's a department or?
Yeah, these are two new departments. One is biomedical engineering and one is computational mathematics.
Okay. Other people familiar, university here?
Yes, yeah.
What
So-
do you do?
I'm a researcher, like postdoc in physics.
Okay, postdoc researcher. You're one of the guys that does all the work, doesn't get paid anything, and he gets all the credit. Isn't that what postdoc means? He does all the work, he doesn't get paid anything, and the professor gets all the credit.
Yeah.
It's like adjunct professors, right? It's like, nobody here's an adjunct professor, right? You are. Any adjunct professors, you get to eat 2 plates of prasad because they know you're hungry. They don't pay adjunct professors much at all. It's difficult. Who else? A couple other hands were here?
Yeah. In biomedical engineering and Institute of Quantitative Health Science and Engineering.
Okay, you're studying or teaching? Or
Yeah,
research?
postdoc research
Okay,
associate.
very good. Okay, good. You can both eat extra.
Yeah.
And you also with the university? What's your,
PhD in food science.
you're working a PhD in food science. Did you know there's a devotee, his wife is the head of Bajari in Chicago. Do you know he has a PhD in food science? He teaches, I think at the University of Chicago, I'm not sure. Yeah, later I can give you his name. It's good to network with other devotees. There was another hand up. Her hand's up, but I don't think she's official.
I'm a postdoc and I'm in plant research.
You're in what research?
This is a plant research department.
Plant research.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I do
Because
competition.
Michigan State was originally agricultural college, right? It was Michigan State
Yeah,
Agricultural
it,
College.
earlier it was named as.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Yes.
Yeah, she was a professor there a few births ago.
Maybe.
Yeah. Anybody else with the university? Just curious. Okay. I was in Ohio State last weekend.
Oh.
I couldn't tell them where it was from. They told me there's a street right by the temple in downtown. I was at the, I don't know where I was, but anyway, we visited the temple. Old temple, it's been there over 50 years, but it's right by Michigan Avenue. So they said people are always painting over the sign.
Oh.
Yeah,
Michigan.
Michigan.
Michigan more than Michigan State, but either way. Bodily concept of life, right? Okay, so I was going to read a little bit from the Ishopanishad, which is a beautiful book. Mantra 1, we'll read this, and it's very appropriate for this age. This is actually something that, as we all know, among other problems that we're facing, the planet's burning itself up. Anybody hear about any tornadoes last week? Only a few hands went up. You are too isolated in your library studies. A few tornadoes in Florida, right? Yeah.
Known about
Hurricanes,
Yeah.
fires in Canada,
Yes.
heat wave in Australia, droughts in I'm not sure where, floods and everywhere else. It's kind of like, there seems to be a problem. So This verse talks about that, okay? I know he knows this verse. I don't know if others do. It's a well-known verse. I'll say you say, okay? Ishavashamidam sarvam yatkincha jagat.
Yakinsha Jagat Jam Jagat
Good. Tena tvatvena bunjidha
Tena Dvatedman Bujidha
magridha kashasvidanam.
Makritha.
Translation. Everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself or herself, which are set aside as a quota, and one should not accept other things knowing well to whom they belong. So I'll say, you say, it's easier to capture it that way. Everything animate or inanimate
Everything animate and inanimate
that is within the universe
that is within the universe
is owned
is owned
and controlled
and controlled
by the Lord.
by the Lord.
One should therefore
One should therefore
accept only those things
accept only those things
necessary for himself,
necessary for himself,
which are set aside
which are set aside
as his quota,
as his quota,
and one should not accept other things,
and one should not accept other things,
knowing well to whom they belong.
knowing well to whom they belong.
That's why when he was caught, he gave those donuts back. He knew this verse was coming. Okay, I'm going to read part of the purport. It's a long purport, and I'm just going to read part of it, and we'll talk a little bit. I do recognize that I came late, and it's also Monday night, but they also said there was a cancel. Do you usually meet on Monday, or how was it they canceled the program Monday? I thought this was like something special. You usually meet on Monday?
So here we meet on the Monday.
Here on Monday?
Yeah, and we read Srila Brihad Bhagavatam.
Okay.
And we do it from 7:30 to 10.
Till 10?
Yeah, sometime.
Seven
Last
o'clock.
time it was
AM?
10:30. 10:30 last. 10:30 p.m.
Really? Wow, okay.
It's few people.
So you've already gone through Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Ishopanishad, Nectar Devotion, Nectar
Yeah.
Instruction, you read
Prabhuji is helping.
Bhagavad. Really? A very advanced group.
We meet usually every week.
You also come here.
I don't come Mondays.
Okay.
Saturdays at that place.
Okay.
But
So maybe they thought there was a program there
we
tonight. or
planned
something.
there, but since not many were available Monday, so
Okay.
we thought no need.
Okay, yeah, no point being there. Okay, makes sense. Okay. All right, so we'll read part of this purport. One should therefore be intelligent enough to know that except for the Lord, no one is a proprietor of anything. One should accept only those things that are set aside by the Lord as his quota. The cow, for instance, gives milk, but she does not drink that milk. She eats grass and straw, and her milk is designated as food for human beings. Some of our vegan friends would agree with that, but anyway. Such is the arrangement of the Lord. Thus, we should be satisfied with those things he has kindly set aside for us, and we should always consider to whom those things we possess actually belong. Take, for instance, our dwelling, which is made of earth, wood, stone, iron, cement, and so many other material things. If we think in terms of Sri Ishopanishad, we must know that we cannot produce any of these building materials ourselves. We can simply bring them together and transform them into different shapes by our labor. A laborer cannot claim to be a proprietor of a thing just because he has worked hard to manufacture it. In modern society, there's always a great quarrel between the laborers and the capitalists. This quarrel, Prabhupada was writing this, I think, probably around 1970 or so. It was first published. It was first published. This version. 1969. Okay? So this is who wrote this purport around 1969. In modern society, there's always a great quarrel between the laborers and the capitalists. This great quarrel has taken an international shape, and the world is in danger. Men face one another in enmity and snarl just like cats and dogs. Sri Ishopanishad cannot give advice to the cats and dogs. but it can deliver the message of Godhead to humankind, through the bona fide acharyas, holy teachers. The human race should take the Vedic wisdom of Sri Ishopanishad and not quarrel over material possessions. One must be satisfied with whatever privileges are given to him by the mercy of the Lord. There can be no peace if the communists or capitalists or any other party claims proprietorship over the resources of nature, which are entirely the property of the Lord. The capitalists cannot curb the communists simply by political maneuvering, nor can the communists defeat the capitalists simply by fighting for stolen bread. If they do not recognize the proprietorship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all the property they claim to be their own is stolen. It's a heavy statement. All the banks, all the mortgage companies, all the office buildings, all the countries, they're all stolen property. Consequently, they will be liable to punishment by the laws of nature. Nuclear bombs are in the hands of both communists and capitalists. Of course, these days they're much stronger, right? And if both do not recognize the proprietorship of the Supreme Lord, it is certain that these bombs will ultimately ruin both parties. Thus, in order to save themselves and bring peace to the world, both parties must follow the instructions of Sri Ishopanishad. Human beings are not meant to quarrel like cats and dogs. They must be intelligent enough to realize the importance and the aim of human life. So stop there. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Buddhade Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Chane. Nirvisesha Srinivada Pashtatara Sachane. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivastava Gaura Bhakta. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare. So if we update this purport a little bit, we would probably change, maybe we change the term for the communists and the capitalists, maybe to the east and the west, or the north and the south, or
Capitalists and capitalists.
Capitalists and capitalists, yeah, ultra nationalists and other forms of extremism like that. But the names change. The designations may change. It's always tricky when they put a toasty leaf in those glasses when you're speaking, because the toasty leaf always goes about a third of the way down and stops. So the names change, but people are always fighting. I grew up in Detroit, and when I was 14, they had the 1968 race riots. I don't know if anybody remembers those who study the history. And I don't even remember what set it off. I was too young, but it was pretty bad. At one point, they simply cordoned off a part of downtown because the police felt it was too dangerous to go into the area where the riots were occurring. They just cordoned it off and let it burn. And so I grew up in Detroit thinking, boy, there's a lot of problems between black people and white people. And also at that time, I think all these things changed, but Hamtramck was a Polish neighborhood. And I grew up, I never asked why, but everybody told Polish, what they called, I don't know if anybody's here Polish origin, they were called Polak jokes. Made fun of Polacks. I don't know if I ever met a Polish person, but still you made fun of him. So I grew up thinking, okay, there's quarrels between blacks and whites, and there's some kind of strife between Polish people and everybody else. And I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood and kind of became aware pretty early on, although I wasn't from a Jewish family, that Jewish people, of course, I didn't know much about the Holocaust, but Jewish people definitely had a sense of being a minority and being persecuted. Although they were relatively affluent, at least the parents had an issue, and the grandparents had big issues, because so many of them had gone through the period of the Holocaust and lost so many family members. And then I traveled when I was in Michigan State, I went for a spring vacation one time with a bunch of friends from my dormitory, and we went out west. And I can remember we saw some Native American people, and you could just tell by the way they dressed and all that they were Native Americans. And I was thinking, wow, cool. You know, misuse of the term, but Indians, they weren't Native American, they were Indians.
Yeah.
Wow, cool. It's an Indian, it's like an honest goodness Indian person. But I was in some kind of store, I can still see this scene, and the lady behind the counter was a white woman, was clearly tense that there was a Native American person in her store. And I was thinking like, wow, you know, I almost want to go over and touch this guy. Like, you real? Like, I've only seen you in TV shows, you know, and tell me about yourself and your people and your history. But she was uptight. She was completely uncomfortable. And then it just dawned on me, wow, it's not just black and white. It's not just whatever, this Europeans and Polish people. It's everybody has these demarcations and these tensions. And later, years and years and years later, as a devotee, I went to Belfast right when they weren't exactly quiet, but they were getting more quiet. Anybody ever been to Belfast? When I was there, probably 15 years, maybe 20, I'm not going to exaggerate, the police stations looked like medieval forts with walls that were 20 feet high and barbed wire across the top. And they were like steel, like, you know, medieval ones were made of stone and they were steel. And when a police car came out, the gates opened. And then they closed again. And the police cars looked like they were armored carriers, like armored military carriers.
Yeah.
And the police said there were guard towers at the top.
Yeah.
It was a war zone. And I was thinking, you're both born in Ireland. You look alike. You know, you're both white people. You talk with similar accents. What gives? And they told me, they said, well, I said, how do you tell people apart? You know, it's Catholics and Protestants there, right? They don't even know what a Native American is, right? They only hate them in Arizona, right? Or these days, Mexicans, right? So I asked some of the devotees, I said, how do you know the difference? And they said, well, because they know what high school you went to. If you went to St. Mary's High School, you're Catholic. If you went to, you know, Peter and Paul or whatever, you're Protestant. If you live on this street, you must be Catholic. If you live on that street, you must be Protestant. And I noticed it was very visible because literally as you drove through residential neighborhoods, there would be like green, I guess green and orange. I don't know who's who. That must be the Irish party. And then red and blue, which is a British, you know, I don't even know the whole history. But so according to your street, according to the high school you went to, they knew I like you or I hate you. You're a friend or you're an enemy.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to really kind of go back in time, and probably none of you can relate to this unless you like reruns. Anybody ever, well, Star Trek, right? There's been a whole bunch of incarnations of that. So when I was 14, so there was original Star Trek. There was one show where they went to some planet. They heard some distress, you know, they're flying around the universe in their spaceship. And they heard some cry for help on their, what are their communication devices from way out outer space. So they go to this planet, and I don't even remember the whole details, but there was a war going on with 2 people left. And they were the 2 people left from the 2 races that lived on that planet. And you're looking at the show, and the whole time you're wondering, well, what's this fight about? And they had makeup in such a way, there was a line right down the middle of their face. And half of it was dark, dark, dark black. And half was bright white, like ivory. Even brighter, like bright white paint and completely dark. And the whole show, you know, the people from Star Trek, you know, they're trying to get them to understand each other, get along, and figure out what's the source of the conflict and all that. And at the end of the show, they kind of reveal what's happening. And I didn't notice it. Maybe it must have been designed so you wouldn't really care. You wouldn't know. At the end, near the end of the show, they reveal the reason they hate each other is this one is black on the right side and left is white. The other one is white on the right side and black on the other side. And they hate each other, and their people are killing each other, and they're all dead and gone. They're the last two people. And the last scene is they're trying to make peace between them, trying to help them, and they had some kind of, device, right, futuristic thing, where they would, quote, beam people down. So they both kind of got into that part of the ship where they send people down to the planets. They beamed down, and then the second one beamed down so they could just continue trying to kill each other, the last two people of their race, or races. And even, it was a show the kids liked. So I remember, even though they get 14, the message was, this is insanity. What's this all about? And of course, in that time, again, going back, that was, we grew up, I'm thinking this because I grew up here, combat and all these TV shows about Americans fighting the Germans. Germans were the bad guys. And meanwhile, we were actually politically, they're making friends with the Germans, because the bad guys were the Russians.
Yeah.
Even though the Russians were the ones that actually defeated, they had, 5, 10 times as many casualties as America. They really were the ones that defeated the Russians. But 5 years after the war, they're the enemies.
Yeah.
And the Japanese were friends. And the Chinese, who were friends, were enemies.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Mm-hmm. And then in my generation, hell no, we won't go. Right? And all the people that had connections, who were smart enough, had enough money, or went to Canada, got out of the Vietnam War. And because of largely social discrimination, the lower income people, a lot of the black young men, they went to Vietnam. And more than 50,000 Americans were killed in Vietnam because they're bad people, we have to stop them. And of course, Vietnamese are thinking, well, the Americans are coming over here and raiding us. The French pulled out, the Americans went in. And I don't know if the name Robert McNamara rings a bell with many of you, but he was the defense secretary under, I believe, Kennedy, and then I think he stayed on with Johnson. He's considered the architect of the old Vietnam War. Millions of dollars, practically destroyed that whole country, killed I don't know how many, untold hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese, 60,000 Americans. 10, 15 years later, you can look it up. He said, we made a big mistake. We never should have gone in there. For political, social reasons, geopolitical reasons. And my generation is like, yeah, but all my friends got killed. And you say it's a big mistake. Thank you very much for admitting it's a big mistake. That really helps a lot of those young men and their girlfriends and their wives, and maybe a few of them even had kids, and definitely they had parents and they had brothers and they had sisters, and a whole generation. And not just that generation. Fast forward a few years later, Russia and Ukraine. A few years ago, I know a lot of people, a lot of devotees in those parts of the world, like maybe I'm Russian and I married a Ukrainian woman. Or I'm Ukrainian and my mom is Russian. And where is this all coming from? I'll pause in this heavy stuff. I'll tell a quick joke because think about it in terms of Russia. Russia has very cold winters, right? And Finland has very cold winters, right? I think you'll like this joke, I hope so. Then I'll go back to the heavy stuff. So one time they were, the borders in Europe, they changed a lot, right? There's wars and there's different social, political things. So they were rewriting the map for this particular part. And it went right down the middle of this village. So there's one house that actually went right down the middle of the house. So they weren't, they weren't sure what to do with this house because it was halfway down between Russia and Finland. So they asked the man, they went and they knocked on the door. He said, sir, he was curious, where would you like to be in the map? Do you want to be in Finland or do you want to be in Russia? He thought about it for a minute. He said, definitely Finland. He said, really? But your grandfather was Russian, your father was Russian, your great-grandfather was Russian, your name was Russian, you've always been Russian. Why would you want to be part of Finland? He said, well, I thought about it a little bit. I don't think I can stand another one of those Russian winters. The craziness of borders, isn't it? The craziness of borders. So back to these other things, we can see, and every generation makes attempts at peace, right? you know, again, my generation, so many protests against the Vietnam War, didn't really do a whole lot of good. They just still killed a lot of people, and then they apologized after they were dead and gone. And you know, a few years later, it's just on and on and on and on. I was listening to a program on NPR the other day. I believe the number was, they said currently, like, I'm going to be within a few, it may be off by 10 because I'm trying to remember the exact, but it was 157 current significant military conflicts in the world today. Not just like some guy shot somebody downtown Detroit or DC where I live, but armies fighting. 157. Might have been 47, that's what I'm not sure about. For what? Prabhupada writes in the first canto of the Bhagavatam, talks about, to bring a little bit home, he talks about how China and India, sometimes they fight over, we know recently another, over like some barren land, right? Nobody lives up there. Now, of course, it gets a little technical these days because there's a question, where's the water go and who's going to control what, so okay. But basically, it's kind of useless land, just as an example. I mean, the Middle East, right? I mean, you're on a campus, you guys know this more than I do. My campuses are torn apart across America. And it all boils down to, well, who do you think's the worst? Which victims have suffered the worst? Maybe if you're a little older and you're more aware of kind of the European experience, you know how the Jews got in Israel in the first place, you think, well, the Jews are the victims. 6 million people were killed, consciously killed. If you read that book, Caste, which is interesting, she talks about how, you know, they were trying to exterminate the whole race. She's not the only one, everybody talks about that. So if you're aware of that period, or if perhaps, you know, if you're Jewish or your spouse is Jewish, they're the victims. And then the whole thing with whatever it was, 1,200 people, there were 14, and they killed, you know, but then the response is so intense, right? And so many Palestinians are killed, then it swings back the other side, and then those people get up and protest, no, we're the victims. And of course, now the numbers far exceed. So, and they're yelling at each other on the campuses, and they're screaming, and they're threatening, and shooting sometime, and all of that. So, the Ishopanishad is trying to say, what's the cause of this whole thing? You know, sometimes we know, like, I don't know, in Washington, I live in Washington, I was recently at a big event, what they call the Institute for Peace. Beautiful building, downtown DC, it's kind of near the State Department. And it was interesting because I was going in, it was filled with security guards. And then those kind of things, they all over Washington, D.C., where if you want to drive a car in, there's a steel that goes down. You bring your car in and goes up, because they got to stop all the trucks that could come in. The Institute of Peace. It's a place for peace studies, how to bring people together, learn how to be more peaceful. And they've got guards and guard towers and, you know, people behind bulletproof glass. I said to the lady on the way out, I said, doesn't it ever strike you as odd? And she didn't get it. She just was thinking, I'm a security guard, I got a job. So, why? What kind of insanity? It's really insanity. It's really insanity. The Vedas say it's insanity. Every scripture of the world practice says it's insanity. Because, first and foremost, we're just passing through. It'd be one thing if you could win a war and make sure that you enjoy it, quote, enjoy it for the next 500 or 5,000 years. That never happens. Prabhupada went to Paris. You probably heard that. And they went by the Eiffel's Tower or something. So Prabhupada commented, he said, so France is here. Where is Napoleon? Right? I mean, again, hundreds of thousands of men got killed. I mean, I don't know what kind of charisma he had, but he kept making armies and wiping out armies, and making more armies and wiping out armies, again and again and again. But Prabhupada said, so Napoleon is there, or France is there, where's Napoleon? Anybody ever been to Macedonia, the Republic of Macedonia? I was really interested because I went to Macedonia for a interfaith, kind of a pretty big interfaith meeting. There's like 300 people there. And when I got the ticket, we were going to land at Alexander the Great Airport. I thought, wow, I mean, I fly a lot, so wow, this is going to be spectacular. Alexander the Great Airport, right? So we flew in Alexander the Great Airport. Maybe 5 times the size of this room. Maybe.
Oh,
2 gates.
just
Alexander the Great Airport. I was in Hungary a few years ago and we took a tour of the parliament. Beautiful building. You know, there was a Austro-Hungarian Empire. And there were, I don't know, before it hit Napoleon, after Napoleon, they got wiped out in World War I and then II again. So you go, the beautiful, beautiful place, and then you go to the kind of the more sacred space, and then you go into like the really special place as a tourist. And you go in and there's 2 of those kind of soldiers, they don't move, you know, they're just looking like the British have that other place in the world, and they just stare straight ahead and they try not to blink, and they don't notice you around, and they're just like guarding this very sacred thing. Can you guess what the sacred thing is in the Hungarian Parliament building in Budapest? It's the crown worn by the king when they used to have an empire. And they can't give it up. It's like they're pipsqueak. Who thinks about Hungary these days? You just hear Hungary's like, you know, there's an Orban, he's kind of a crazy guy. But they're very insignificant. But they think, no, we had an empire. You know, if you study a little bit of European history, the Swedish had an empire, the Germans had an empire, the French had an empire, the Polish had an empire, the Russians had an empire, the Italians had an empire. Almost everybody had an empire. So where's the empire? It's gone. It's gone. So that's what is being described here, that we think we own things in this world. I was thinking today, I was driving out here and I was kind of, you know, you drive by and you remember, I went there when I was in high school, went there and went this and this and this. And then I was thinking of some of the homes that we lived in, like 50 years ago, right? And I was just kind of wondering how many people have lived in that house. At least I went to visit that house about 3 years ago. It's still there, kind of. It's really fallen apart. But I was thinking how many families have come and gone and raised their kids in that house. And I was thinking, like, at least some of them would say, yeah, I own this house. Like, I assume this apartment, right? I own an apartment. You rent, whoever is our host or hostess, you rent this place, right?
Jagannath.
What's that? Jagannath. He owns this place. That's the right answer. Yeah. But maybe, like most apartments, you rent the apartment. And then people talk about you save enough money, you buy your house. Okay? But everybody knows you don't really own the house. Who owns the house? Well, okay, don't be too philosophical. The bank owns the house, isn't it? And you miss 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 payments depending on the state and the local laws. They send a nice man with a big smile and a piece of paper that says you have 24 hours to get your stuff out of the side of the street. If you don't, they bring a bunch of nice guys with badges and they unload it for you, put it on the sidewalk so it can get dried in the sun. In case you didn't get time to finish your shower, you can dry yourself outside in the sun. So who owned the house?
the bank.
And even if you pay for the house, you get the apartment, you pay rent for a long time, then you move up in the social ladder, and then you get the house, and then you work hard for 30 years. Most mortgages are 30 years, you pay it off. How long do you keep it? Anytime you move in a house, you got to know that there was another family, that had babies and raised the babies, and mom died and dad died, and another family came and raised babies. And so who owns the house? Even when we think I own the house, who owns the house? We don't own the house. We're in the illusion we own the house. We don't own the house. Because there were people before us that own the house. There's going to be people after us that own the house. We're just temporarily using the house. So the question becomes, if I'm just passing through, if we understand we're just passing through, then we kind of have a couple choices. One choice, which is a very popular choice, eat, drink, and be merry. I think the other half of the expression is, because tomorrow you may die. Right? That one kind of goes along with the bumper sticker. I mentioned this the other day in Farmington. There used to be a bumper sticker you see it all around, would say, whoever dies with the most toys wins. So you got to collect as many toys as you can. And then you die, and then they come and they throw them away, and then the next person gets the house, and they collect as many toys as they can. You know, whether it's a 3-year-old's toy or it's a Maserati toy or whatever you collect, it's a toy. So here in the Ishopanishad, it's telling us there's a whole different view of things. But in order to understand that view, one has to begin to think, actually, I don't own this place. And even, you know, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna starts out with that first thing, I don't even own the body. Right? Like I have some circulation problems. I've had it for 40 years. I finally decided I'm going to go have some vein treatment. So they make you watch a video. You know, at least the healthcare company, they make you watch a video. So I'm watching the video, and it's all like a nice woman's voice, and they show you the pretty pictures, this and that, and this and that, this and that. You know, usually there's no complications, this and that. But, you know, here's a few things that could happen. Could have this happen, could have this happen, could have this happen, could have this happen. And then they said, and you could die. I'm not exaggerating. And you could die. You know, which we're going to tell you because we don't want your lawyer suing us after you die. Right? It's a big thing. We all know that. Lawyers and doctors, they really love each other. They have a loving relationship. Just like a little tiny surgery. And it actually happens. You hear about it. People go into, I knew someone one time, they had a relative went in for dental surgery. They died in the surgery.
Yeah, just
For their teeth. So, you know, somebody might say, if somebody said for the first time, they go, my God, I just came for dinner. This is really depressing. What do you let this guy talk for? He's just really making, you know, he's ruining my week. But the idea is, I guess explain, there's another story, a little bit of a joke. Wife comes home one night, husband's there, late, you know, it's this time of year and they get home late and it's dark outside. And she goes to park the car and the husband's out like in the street looking for something. So she says, what are you looking for? He said, I lost my keys. Said, oh, let me help you. So they're looking, and they don't find the keys. And he's wondering, you sure you lost them here? Or she says, so she says, are you sure you lost them here? He says, no, I lost them in the driveway, but there's a light out here. It's easier to look. It's the wrong place, but it's easy to look. So that's our situation. We're in the material world. And if somebody says to you, like maybe some of you had the experience, you know, you talk to somebody, you just bring up some kind of deeper philosophical thought. And oftentimes the answer is, whew, I think you should just go to us to happy hour tonight. You know? Or people invite you over and say, what are you going to do this weekend? Well, we get together a bunch of friends and, you know, we chant mantras and we read spiritual text. We try to understand self-realization. And they say, wow, that sounds like a waste of time. Why don't you go home and binge a few movies with us? Which, okay, everybody has some degree of, you know, we need some material pleasure in this world. But it wastes a lot of time. It wastes a lot of time. And that's what the Ishopanishad is trying to help us understand. If I don't own anything, if I'm just passing through, then either as many people say, just forget about it, you know, drown your sorrows and all of that. Or, you know, people get addicted actually to different behaviors just to try to, you know, go to gambling. You know, gambling is like big billboards some places. I didn't see them in Michigan, but other places, big billboards, gamble, you know, 97% return on the slot machines, which is a joke because that means they take 3 cents out of every dollar you give them. But then immediately on the bottom it says, you know, 1-800-GAMBLERS Anonymous. Like it's this big sign telling you it's fun, but the small sign says, well, watch out, it's not really fun. You know? So there's so many examples of that. So therefore the Ishopanishad is just making this point for us. Actually, we're looking in the wrong place. To the extent we're still thinking materially, or the extent that society is looking materially, they're looking in the wrong place. And because they're not, in general, people are not becoming satisfied through more money, more power, more sense gratification, more fame, this, that. Because they're not satisfied. They need more and more and more and more. And it becomes, I want what you have, and I am now, you're my enemy. The German people, they had this whole philosophy that you ever heard of Ken Burns? So if you, perhaps like me, have kind of an idealistic perspective of America and all the great ideals, watch this show about the Holocaust in America. Because the German people, their idea, what they were kind of, their fever pitch, we need more land. We're a better race of people, we need more land, and we're going to push everybody else out of the way. Guess where Hitler and his German people say they got that idea from, and who gave a good example of how it could be a successful way to lead your country? What example do they give?
USA.
United States, the Europeans, and the native people. Right? Just pushed them out of the way. I mean, this is to the world, it's not just here. You go back, where's the Etruscans, right? They were there before the Romans came, they're gone. Where's the Mayan Indians? They're gone, right? It's over and over and over again. But the point is that they looked to that, and he actually explained the Holocaust, at least up to the point they just mass extermination of the Jews. They explained it. They said, look, we're putting people in ghettos. What are they doing in America? The black people don't get to use public toilets. The black people don't get to go in swimming pools. The black people don't get equal education. We're doing it to the Jews. What's the difference? That was their rationale. That was, part of their excuse. Maybe just their propaganda. So the idea is, we're looking in the wrong place and we're forced into conflict with each other because there's limited resources. The famous Standard Oil was founded by Rockefellers, right? John D. Rockefeller was, I think, the first. And he, like, multi-millionaire, like whoever the big three guys are now. Jeff Boltzmann, is that his name? Yeah. I live in D.C., right? He owns Washington Post. So they asked John D. Rockefeller one time, fabulously rich. He owned all the wells, most of the processing, and most of the gas stations, if you can imagine. Later they broke them up. It was a big, nasty monopoly. But listen to this closely. They asked him one time, how much money is enough? You have so much money, but you're working so hard to get more money. How much is enough? How much is enough? You know what he said? Really profound. Just a little bit more.
No.
How much is enough? Just a little bit more. So Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita, when the soul is not in touch with the spiritual experience, not in touch with God, not in touch with ourselves, we're looking in the street because there seems to be some light there for our keys, but our keys are over there. We're looking for happiness in material experiences, but we can't find it because we're spiritual beings. And we need spiritual experience. And because we don't get it, we get more angry, more frustrated. We blame everybody else. All the Mexican, the rapists are coming across the border, etc. It's the same phenomena, Southern schools in the 1950s. I was thinking about this for someone this morning. Some places you go and, they have plaques up in honor of the young black girls at 11 years of age that had to be marched into the school with the National Guard, 10 big guys with guns just to get in the door because all the white people were like spitting on them and harassing them, So, because we're thinking this is my land, this is my school, I'm better than you, the color of my skin is better than the color of your skin, it just leads to unending conflict. Like Prabhupada says, without a change, people will come to more and more conflict, and now there's so many terrible weapons in the world. It's almost you wonder why haven't they used them already. We pray they never do, but the chance. Sometimes you see that nuclear clock. You ever seen that thing? Talk about that. The clock is like 1 minute from 12, and if something happens, they negotiate something with nuclear weapons, and maybe it moves back a minute. Like we're right on the edge of that. And so, therefore, that's the difficulty. But then the positive things are that we're actually spiritual beings. We're meant to experience Krishna. We're actually eternal. We're full of knowledge. We're full of bliss. The Supreme Absolute Truth is a person who has a personal relationship with each and every one of us. But we don't want to develop that relationship. It's like the wife says, let's go get your keys in the parking lot. No. It looks nice out here. I think if I keep looking, right, they say sometimes, hoping against hope. Hoping against hope. So instead of moving into a new house and people thinking, thank you, God, for giving me this house for my family. I'll be here for a few years. Actually, you're the proprietor. Jagannath's the proprietor. Gauranitas is the proprietor. Thank you for giving me, allowing us to have this place. People move in and think this is our home. Instead they think, wait a minute, you know how many people have come and gone in this place? So while you're there, why don't you appreciate the gifts that Krishna's given and try to spiritualize that a little bit. You know, still got to go to work, out of a house, got to raise your kids. We do all those things. And add Krishna. Add the one thing that can actually make us happy. Add the one thing that can actually give us meaning. And if we don't do that, we just, Prabhupada said, heart heavy, living like cats and dogs. He says many times, they eat, they sleep, they have babies, they have nests, their little homes, little holes in the ground. The dogs bark, woof, woof, woof. Like that. They fight, they defend themselves with their teeth. Like in India, you get a lot, you see what dogs defending themselves. You see it every other minute, right? These dogs fighting. It's a very clear message. Here, people, they have their dogs on leashes. They think they're peaceful until they get next to another dog. Then they start barking. So, wait, just a few thoughts. And so, the literature, the teaching is so profound because it's giving us insight on the way of this world and why it is such a mess and why all of the peace initiatives, ultimately, if you don't add a spiritual element, they can't succeed. They just can't. With all the good intentions of the world, they just can't succeed. But if you add Krishna, if you add God, if you put the Supreme Personality in the center, then we're all connected. Then we're all family. White, black, brown, Gujarati, Bengali, Marathi, you know, because Krishna's in the center. Russians, Ukrainians. That was the prediction. I'll stop with this. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who was in our lineage, you know, a couple of generations back, great scholar and teacher in the British Raj time. And he predicted, he said, you know, one day there will be Russians and Americans and Indians and French. They'll all come together. They'll chant God's names together. And when we do that, then we lose this sense of bodily, slowly. We have to work at it. We have to make sure we don't allow ourselves to slip into that. These are some of the messages that Isha Upanishad are so profound, simultaneously explain why there's so many problems in the world and give us the secret how we can actually become more happy and peaceful and not contribute to more conflict. That's a big thing. We're Vaishnavas. We don't want to contribute to the conflict. So maybe I'll stop there. Any questions or comments? And I've been watching them the whole time. You're all good? The donuts are still back there. Okay. Any questions? Yes, please.
So the last sentence was really nice, that if you keep God at the center, then everyone will feel like brothers and then it will not have any conflict and anything.
Yeah.
But that's the whole point, right? The different religions, they don't believe in the same God. They say that you...
No, they believe in the same God. They just don't understand they have different names for the same God.
Yes, but they don't understand that. That's the biggest problem.
Well, it's not the biggest problem, but it's a problem. It's a problem. That's why we should talk to other religious people and understand what they can tell us about Krishna. If we're walking around thinking, I have the truth, and you're walking around thinking you have the truth, and he's thinking he has the truth, and he's saying he has the truth, my truth's better than your truth. No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Next, we're fighting. It's the same old, same old. Some people, race, they fight. Gender, they fight. Religion, they fight. Culture, they fight. Language, they fight. White on this side or black on this, right? They fight. But actually, you know, if we spend a little bit of time, Prabhupada even comments in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, text 7 or 8, that it's a couple of verses of Krishna says, wherever there's a decline in religious practice, at that time I come myself. And he says to annihilate the miscreants, to protect the pious devotees, his devotees, pious people, and to reestablish religious principles, I come again and again. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, specifically says, there's not a fact that Krishna only appears on Indian soil.
Yes.
So he can appear anywhere and everywhere according to his desire, but the mission is always the same, to elevate people in God consciousness, and the only difference is according to time, place, and circumstance. So he's a professor. You teach undergraduates or graduate students or postgrads like these guys, or who do you teach?
Both.
Both. Okay. What's the youngest that you teach? You teach any freshmen?
Yeah.
Okay. So just an example. So if you go to class at 8 o'clock and you're teaching freshmen bio, whatever, You see how much I captured of what he does. And then 2 hours later, you teach some postgrads, right? Are you going to teach the same thing?
No.
No. Your capacity is the same. It hasn't changed in 2 hours. But because of the audience, you're going to change what you teach. You're going to adapt it according to the time and place. Now, if I'm the undergraduate and I walk in and see what these guys are doing, I think, well, they're not studying what I'm studying because it's way advanced and I don't understand it. Again, we could maybe quarrel. I mean, we wouldn't, but you can see how it could, because I don't think you're doing what I'm doing because you're doing it so differently. Same thing, you walk in a Catholic church. Then you've been in a Catholic church, they have benches that fold down under the seats in front of them, and they get on their knees and they pray.
Yeah.
You go to mosque, right? They bow down, they stand up, they bow down, they stand up, chant prayers. You go to our place, they bow down, fall flat or put up. We bow down in different ways. What's the purpose of bowing down? Why do we bow down?
In respect.
In general.
In respect.
Again, respect, right? It's a representation to show our humility before God.
Yes.
Some people, they, like the Jewish people, they wear kippas or yarmulkes on their head because your head should always be covered in the presence of the Lord.
Yes.
You go to other places, you better take that hat off because it's disrespectful to keep your hat on in church. Unless you're a lady, then you're supposed to wear really fancy hats. Yeah. But so what's the purpose of the hat or not the hat? The purpose is to show your respect to God. There was one devotee a few years ago, he was kind of a scholarly person, Jewish background. He went to a Jewish Orthodox, the Jewish people from sundown, their Sabbath begins until the next day. You're not supposed to use machines of any kind. And they've had to kind of figure out how to deal with modernity with that. I was at an event a couple years ago, stayed at it was like a Jewish hotel. And like Friday morning, they had bagels, really nice bagels. And a big selection and jam. And so I'm like, wow, bagels, fantastic. Got some vegetarian here. So a lot of bagels. Came down Saturday morning, the toaster was gone. The bagels were gone. There was nothing. I said, well, why is this? He said, well, it's the Sabbath. And you can't, we don't, because there was the waiters were just Italian guys or something. They weren't Jewish, So I said, well, what is this? He said, well, because it's the Sabbath, you can't use machines. And I saw all the rabbis coming out of the back room with coffee, steaming coffee. I said, well, wait a minute, how is it you can heat the coffee, but you can't make the bagels? He said, because the coffee machine they turned on last night, before the Sabbath, right? So the coffee stays hot the whole day, because you can't get by without coffee, right? So anyway, we have our crazy little things we do sometimes too. But the real thing is, and just to answer your question, we believe Krishna comes again and again and again. He says in that same purport, sometimes he comes himself, sometimes in this disguised form like Mahaprabhu, sometimes he sends his servant, sometimes he sends his son. Okay. So he comes again and again and again. And, we have to make sure we don't, if one's proud, neophytes or beginners in a sense that are actually having some religious experience, sometimes it's kind of a natural thing. I'm so inspired by Krishna, or I'm so inspired by Jesus, or I'm so inspired by the mosque, or I'm so inspired by the Gurdwara. I'm so excited about this that it's really unfortunate you're not experiencing this. And how could you? Because you've never been to the mosque or the Gurdwara, the temple. But then you get a little more mature, really, the scriptures say. And you realize that, well, he's not just in the temple, he's not just in the mosque, he's everywhere. He just helps us connect with him more in those holy places. And then the quarreling goes down. But we live, this is the age of quarrel and hypocrisy, so. But we should set an example, Sometimes when people say to you, I know, probably most of you, and it gets into some touchy geopolitical things. You try to tell a Jewish person 30 years ago, Germans are nice people. Whoa, I'm not going there. I'm going to have right? And you talk to a lot of people from South Asia. I had a very dear friend who invited, we have some Vaishnava Muslim dialogues in DC. We missed a couple years because of COVID. Very, 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 very sweet person. And I asked him, could you come and participate? Want to participate in this, And he said, I can't do that. I said, why not? And some of you may have similar experiences. He said, Prabhu, we were raised to hate those people.
Oh.
He was one of the nicest people you ever met. Very sweet, soft-hearted, but when talk to Muslims, we hate those people. And I was raised in Detroit. There's a lot of folks, I hope it's changed now. There's a lot of white folks. You know, you do not want a black person moves next door. Ooh, you move out. You hate those people. You know, I'm sure some of you maybe have experienced that as people of Indian origin. You know, maybe there's some people from whatever, they don't like you because your skin. You know, I mean, I reverse it. I try to go to you mentioned Jagannath. I try to go in the Jagannath temple. You know what happens then, right? They beat me. No, yeah, it's not funny. They beat you. They don't, if they don't think you're Hindu. You can smoke, you can drink, you can, you know, break every principle of decency in the world. But if you have the right color skin, you speak Hindi or some other, you know, or Oriental language, so you get right in, you get darshan because you're special. But a white person, a black person, forget it, they beat you.
They beat us also.
Yeah, because you're been in the West too long?
No. They just like to beat everyone. So if you give them money, they won't beat you.
No, it's not that easy.
It's the difference one.
It's
You get beaten up outside of the temple.
Yeah,
we
no,
get
they
beaten up inside the
will
temple.
not let you in. They
Oh
will
yeah,
not.
for us,
Yeah.
they are pretty big with their sticks.
Yeah, it's just they're, you know, it's very materialistic. It's even like you go to the Gambhira where we can go. The minute you walk in, paisa. You know, you're trying to go to like some of the other place, the holy place, you know, you're there 30 seconds and they come up and they, especially people from another, you know, it's like they touch your head, they throw flowers, they throw them in the pot and they go, 100 rupees. That's a different thing. But I'm just making that point, you know. Got a question or comment?
Prabhuji, just some impressions, just to, if I could absorb some of your nectar. You mentioned the interfaith coalition that you're proud of,
Yeah, a few things.
and the the dialogue and the synergy that you create from that must be phenomenal.
It is.
That's thinking outside the box. Can you share some of those experiences?
Yeah, I can say personally, I think it's probably the most inspiring weekend I have every year. And there's different kinds of dialogue. You know, there's dialogue where a church and a mosque or whatever, they get together because the city wants to plow up the street. And they don't want that because they lose their parking lot, so they come together for some kind of coalition. And there's other, you know, different kinds of dialogue where, you know, you live next door to a Buddhist, your dentist is Buddhist, and you just kind of talk to them a little bit. So what we've been doing is a little more in-depth. It's like, I'll particularly talk about the Vaishnava Christian dialogue, and that's been going for 27 years, and all those people are getting old now. We bring some young people, but a lot of older people. So it's monks, like Catholic monks and abbots who are in charge of monasteries, Catholic professors, priests. Same thing with the Protestants. We have more Catholics come than Protestants. We have like devotees come. Sometimes sannyasis come. There's none live in DC, but sometimes come. Again, scholars, senior devotees. And we pick a different topic and we discuss it for 2 days. And usually what we do is one person from each tradition is assigned to like write a paper. Over the years, it's more become a presentation than a paper. It's less work. About whatever, maybe the name of God. That's just a topic we did years ago. So the Christian will present what our tradition teaches about the name of God. The Vaishnava talks about what our tradition teaches about the name of God. And then usually we do that for like an afternoon, and the next day so we have prasadam. We have like do Friday afternoon from 2 till 7, and we have dinner together. The next day we have breakfast, and then we have lunch, and we end about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So, and we have shared worship. So there's like a Christian worship, and then there's a Vaishnava worship. Some people, it's a little uptight thing. So we don't participate in worship, we will observe your worship. It's like the bishop said, you can't do that. And other people have different bishop, and they can participate more. But it's very, it's very interesting. The name of God, I remember the one year I liked the most, it was a while ago, but we did it 2 years in a row. Spirit in the world, affirmation, renunciation. Because in our tradition, you're supposed to be like this guy, you're supposed to renounce. Prabhupada says that's the best. And at the same time, most of us, we got to pay, get the rent, get the mortgage, right? We have a car. He has a car too. Anybody seen his car? This man has renounced. You want to see renunciation? Look at his car. Right? but it still works. He uses it for Krishna. So, in the Christian tradition too, like there's a nice simple thing that says, one of their 10 commandments is honor your father and mother. Beautiful instruction. But there's at least one story, and I'm not a scholar of the Bible at all. Someone came to him and said, I want to follow you, but I have to go bury my father. Seems in line with the 10 commandments. He said, you're not worthy. You can't, don't come. Basically, you're too attached. But you told me to honor my father. So there's tension in the tradition. So we have tensions in our tradition. They have some tensions in their tradition. And it really helps us go deeper, actually.
Rudy, do you walk away with more commonalities and differences?
Oh, absolutely.
So the bonding
Yeah.
process
And even the
continues.
differences are, you know, it's like he's a brahmachari, I'm a grihastha, okay? Now, if, you know, how long have you been devotee? 15 years. So maybe like the first couple of years, I know when I was a new devotee, grihasthas were like, forget it, you weren't serious. Because we were immature, and we thought if you're going to actually love Krishna, you have to be renounced. There's still tension in our society today. How much do we respect women? Because there's some things in the tradition that seem to imply that men have a better advantage of waking up their Krishna conscious. Although Prabhupada himself said, I travel everywhere around the world, there's always more women in their places of worship than there are men. So women have a propensity to be more spiritual, more religious. But so there's, you know, there's some tensions there. You know, sometimes we talk about, you know, more practical challenges. What are you doing to keep how do you keep your young people in the church? And what are we doing? And those kind of things too. And it's really rewarding because you realize these people they have a totally different culture than I do. And also, you don't judge on the externals because there's too many externals that are different, right? Sometimes in our communities and every other religious community, they judge you on the externals. So you get past that so quick. Yes?
Continue.
No, that was it. I just finished. That was it.
I was hearing the examples you gave and sort of
I think the ladies are ready.
maybe
Don't do that.
Save some for
They're,
ourselves.
they're safe. Okay. Yes, Prabhu.
living through the examples. It's people are seeking love,
Yeah.
but then instead of
Ultimately, yeah.
love, they accept an identity, and that
Well, they
identity
accept an identity and then they define what kind of love they're looking for.
that identity defines a barrier to their
Yeah,
love,
yeah.
and so then they
And
cannot
the opportunity.
they cannot step out. They cannot step out, and all we have so many identities coming from race, nationality, blah blah, position, work,
Upadis, right? Upadis.
and
Different designations, upadis, and we identify that I'm a businessman, I need a big car. You know, I'm whatever, I'm a rebellious college student, I don't take a bath, you know, whatever.
and so we define our barriers, and then we cannot step out, and then we struggle because it's not our nature. Our nature is not to be confined by a definition of our identity and our love. Whereas when we look at Jagannath, then we understand that Jagannath really wants everyone to come and be with him, to
Yeah.
play with him, to
Yes.
spend time. And so when we look to him, then that inspires us, that we want everyone to be together with Jagannath. And otherwise, we are always in these barriers. We don't, and those barriers are everywhere. Someone doesn't want to love another child because it's not their own child. Someone doesn't want to love another person because they are not their husband or wife, or not their guru, not their sampradaya, not their. All these are barriers, and because in the end it doesn't matter, because in the end we are looking for something that's boundless love.
Yeah, that's the condition, that's our, according to the Vaishnava tradition, that's who we are, that's what we're looking for. And the more we practice the process of cleansing our heart, the more that makes sense, the more that becomes real, and the more the attractions of this world, we gradually realize are just superfluous. Yeah, thank you for your comments. Yes, Prabhu.
My question is very basic.
So how do we get detached from the material world?
Yeah, very nice. You can answer that question in a lot of ways. Sometimes Prabhupada would say, what material world? There is no material world. Because it's all made by Krishna, it's owned by Krishna, it's meant to offer to Krishna. The thing that makes it material really is our consciousness. Because if I'm thinking, as you were saying, if I'm understanding I'm spirit soul, then I don't discriminate against other people based on their body or their color or their economic status or like that. So the basic way we get clear from this misconception is a few things. One, especially in this age, mantra is very powerful. It's described, this is Kali Yuga, it's the age of quarrel, hypocrisy. These different processes are given by God and by different acharyas in different ages. So this is the age of Kali. We're 5,000 years into a 432,000 long period of darkness. But in this age, particularly this chanting is described. So that's one thing. Because, and it's very beautiful, simple examples are given for us. If you take a piece of iron and you put it in fire, it's still iron, right? But if I pull it out and I say, here, touch this, you gonna touch it? You're not gonna touch it because it's fire.
I can touch it, but my hand will.
You'll burn your hand right off,
Yeah.
right? No more hand. Because through the association with the fire, the iron becomes fire. So when we associate with materialistic things, we become more materialistic. You associate with angry people, you become angry. You hang out with lusty people, you become lusty. You hang out with PhDs, you become a PhD, right? You hang out with thieves, you become a thief. You associate with spiritually minded people, you keep yourself in that fire of that association, and it gradually awakens. So that's an important thing. So chanting and association is extremely important. And also, especially you're all, intelligent, highly educated people, reading is very, very important to hear transcendental knowledge, which is so much different than the stuff most people fill their minds with all day long. So, hearing from the guru, acharyas, chanting mantras, associating with devotees, those are like the most important elements. Eating sanctified foods, trying to avoid things that really bring us down. It's a big reason we're vegetarian, because if you eat food that's of a violent nature, you're consuming that, you're taking the karma for the animal that's killed. I mean, just imagine if somebody walked in here and killed, whatever killed me, cut my throat, hung me upside down, whatever different ways they kill different animals. We know a little, I'm not a scientist, there's probably scientists here. Your body goes into some kind of crisis mode and emits all kinds of crazy chemicals to try to help you. Okay, so that's what's there in my body at that moment. Then you kill it, and then you eat that on the top of everything else. So how are people not going to be a little crazy or a lot crazy? And then as far as the vegetarianism, there's just so many things. It's better for the environment, it's better for our health, it's better for the economy. I saw a thing in Newsweek magazine, I don't know if they print that anymore. It said that the amount of water it takes to produce one steer, one, cow, male cow, you could float instead of a battleship. That's how much water it takes, because by the time they, the corn and the feeding it, all that.
Yeah.
And they say for every, something like every one, in terms of protein and food value, for every 1 pound of meat, it takes as much as it takes to produce 18 pounds of vegetarian, like grains and things like that. It varies depending on what you're growing. And so the resources that goes into producing 1 pound of meat, you could have produced 15 or 16 or 18 pounds of other food. So people are concerned there's not enough food, but we're wasting it. I was just drove through Indiana, and field after field after field after field of corn plants that haven't been harvested yet, and they're completely brown. They're like the color of this chair. And then I saw some places they were harvesting, like sweet corn. You got to harvest it when the plant's still, because that's for people. But miles and miles and miles and miles and miles of just growing corn for cattle and other animals. And all that corn gets fed to the animal, 18 bushels, to produce one little bit of meat. And so much water to produce. So even from a practical way. Yeah. So is that okay? So associate with other spiritually minded people, especially devotees. Chant Krishna's name. Do you have any beads?
Yes.
Okay, chant on your beads. Very important. Read. Spiritualize your home. You're all pious people of Indian origin. It's okay to have one picture of your. You can do two. It can be 15 if you want, but just make of your parents and your great grandparents. Okay. But everything else in the house, Krishnaize it. Get rid of all those pictures of the golf game you won when you were 10. Whatever. You don't have to get rid of them. Just put them on. Take them off the main wall. Put things there that remind you of Krishna. Play music that reminds you of Krishna. Have friends that remind you of Krishna. Eat food that reminds you of Krishna.
Yeah.
And then gradually it's described, sometimes we have like amnesia, we just forgotten. And if we get reminded enough, then it starts coming back to us. Wow, I am spiritual. I don't need all these other things. I can be happy just chanting God's names. Would you add anything to that about important steps? His question? Would you add anything? Yeah? Hang out with him. Eat a lot of donuts. Yeah. There's no disqualification. That's the wonderful thing about bhakti. If you like Prabhupada comments sometimes, and we see there's so many people interested in yoga and meditation these days, which is great. And at the same time, the real purpose of yoga and meditation is to connect us with Krishna. It's not just to help us be more peaceful or lose some weight, or it's not a social thing. It's meant for a higher purpose. We should take advantage of that. Maybe one more question, or it's not 10 yet, but it's 9, 5 to 9. So I have a schedule. Should we take one more question? Should we stop?
Should we have kirtan?
Oh no, kirtan. Okay. I think you have a harmonium where you are.
Yes.
You should bring it more often, right? Actually, I was thinking when we're doing little kirtan with just one pair of kartals and clapping hands, that's how it started in Russia. If you go to Russia today, there's a lot of Hare Krishnas